Please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Our largest single-theme land expansion ever.
Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream.
Matterhorn Matt presents Matterhorn Mondays.
Episode, you guys. We have, like I said, a very great episode. Let's go and get started. Yay!
Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Our largest single-theme land expansion ever.
Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream.
Matterhorn Matt presents Matterhorn Mondays.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 134 of Matterhorn Mondays, coming to you live from the Outpost. I'm your host, Matterhorn Matt.
I'm your temporary co-host for this week, Jeremy.
Jeremy's back again, you guys, as a co-host. Alex will sadly not be joining us on this week's episode. Not sure if he'll be back next week, but, you know, send Alex some good vibes, you guys, on Twitter. Link in the description. Go sub to Alex on YouTube. But we are once again joined by Mr. T. Will, returning guest. Why don't you say hello to everybody listening, everybody watching?
Hello.
This is T. Will, you guys. T. Will's been on the show a few times before, but you guys know the drill.
I'm just invading, and he's just allowing me on the show as pity.
It's true. I didn't even say he could come on. He just jumped in the Discord call when Jeremy and I were here, and now I guess T. Will's on the show, you guys, but just kidding. But anyways, you guys know the drill. Links to all these social media will be down in the description below. And as I always say, if you'd like to be wished a happy birthday live on the stream, live on the podcast, you can do so by clicking the Google form down in the description below, submitting your name and your birthday, and we'll add it to our birthday calendar here today. And we do have 3 birthdays this week. Today, actually, Sunday the 3rd of May is Jeff's birthday. Happy birthday to Jeff, as well as tomorrow on Monday the 4th. What's so funny, Jeremy?
I don't know.
All right. Well, anyways, tomorrow on Monday the 4th, Emily M's birthday. Happy birthday to Emily. And as well on Saturday, the 9th of May, it's Sketchagon Angel. Big fan of a longtime viewer of the show. It's his birthday, so happy birthday to all 3 of you wonderful people. Happy birthday to everybody else who didn't happen to submit. Like I said, link down in the description below. And you guys, we've said it before, it's mandatory to leave a voicemail now if you're watching the episode. 575-386-5814. If you'd like to voice your opinion on any of the topics we have at hand, you can go ahead and call, leave a voicemail. We do listen to the voicemails live throughout the episode. We love hearing what you guys have to say. Love hearing your voices. It's not the same as when you type in chat, ask questions and stuff. It's much more better.
Personal.
Personal, there it is. Much more personal if you call in.
More immediate.
Yeah, all 3 of those words. If you call in, leave a voicemail. But anyways, you guys know the drill. Let's get right into today's episode. It's time for Matt Snaps, everybody. Let's do this.
A whole wide world of knowledge waits underneath the cap. It's once again time this week for Matterhorn Matt Snaps.
And as always, you guys, we're going with the classic once again. We have, what is this? Mango Madness Snapple, as you can see here. it's the only one that I happen to have on hand at the moment. So let's go ahead and pop this Snapple open here, shall we? Let's go ahead and do this. I don't think the glass ones give a good snap, but anyways, let's see. Light could travel.
Bad.
I mean, normally it's like, but this time it was like, if that doesn't make any sense to anybody, but that's okay.
It did.
I'm glad at least one person could understand. But let's see. This says light could travel around the Earth nearly 7.5 times in 1 second. Isn't that crazy, you guys? Light is almost faster than me. Actually, I can travel around the Earth 8 times, just by jogging too. So that's not even my full speed. But anyways, we do have a great episode planned today for you guys, and we're trying to streamline this show because I'm sure if you guys have noticed the past few weeks, we've sort of been talking in circles. The past few months, maybe even, but especially since
years.
Years. It's very exactly 100% true. But since this whole quarantine, parks closed, started, we've sort of been talking in circles about all the stories that have been coming out. Not a lot of really profound pieces of news. So we're trying to really streamline the episodes going forward. Trying not to make them as long. I know some people do enjoy the longer 2 hours, 2.5 hour episodes, but for us here, we don't necessarily enjoy, not that we don't enjoy doing the episodes, but it's not ideal to do 2.5 hour episodes every week. So we are trying to streamline these episodes, make them significantly shorter, not like 30 minutes or something, at least an hour and a half, somewhere along those lines. So yeah, we're trying to streamline the episodes. Leave feedback down in the comments below. We always love listening to what you guys have to say about how we're structuring the episodes. If you have any topics that you'd like us to discuss, you're always welcome to do that. You can also call in, leave a voicemail if you have any thoughts on that as well. But before we get into any of our main topics, it is, of course, time to get into this week's News from the Peak.
We now present to you News from the Peak.
And News from the Peak. This is very interesting, this first bit here. Florida man caught camping in Discovery Island at Walt Disney World, you guys. This is one of the funniest stories that has come out of these past few months. Officers search for him by boat, helicopter, and on foot, and before they can make contact with him, the man... he described the island as a tropical paradise, which I don't know if I would categorize Discovery Island as a tropical paradise, because from like the pictures and videos that we've seen out of like recent years, it looks really run down. But anyways, nonetheless, that was our first bit here of News from the Peak. Second bit, News from the Peak. Expansion plans at Walt Disney Studios Park at the Disneyland Paris Resort have been halted. As I'm sure you guys remember, these expansion was set to include a Star Wars land, Frozen land, Marvel land, as well as new nighttime entertainment offerings in the big lagoon there that you can see in this piece of concept art. So yeah, this is of course due to the global catastrophe that's happening at the moment. But yeah, very sad about. I'm sure eventually they'll get underway. But here for our final bit of News from the Peak, 2 individuals actually filed lawsuits for injuries caused on the Walt Disney World People Mover in the Magic Kingdom. And yeah, this is very interesting to me. One individual claims to have suffered serious injuries in a crash between 2 vehicles, leading to a life-changing spinal surgery. And another individual also reported injury during a crash, but did not specify his exact injuries. So yeah, this is not the first time I think we've discussed something like this on the show when it comes to like injuries on the People Mover that led to a possible lawsuit. But do you guys have any thoughts on any of these bits here of News from the Peak? Jeremy, let's go ahead and start with you. What do you have to say about this week's News from the Peak?
So really the one that really stands out to me the most that's worth commenting on are the expansion plans being halted. It's kind of sad because Walt Disney Studios, certainly the worst theme park ever, probably. Definitely needed to have that new life breathed into it.
Yeah.
And the concepts looked pretty interesting. It would have been a nice beautification, even just aesthetically, to the park. So it's kind of sad that that's going to be halted. Hopefully it's just halted in place. It's not canceled completely. I don't think it's going to be canceled completely.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just another sign of the times and the of what's going on. So hopefully they can get those all of that back up and going as soon as possible.
Yes, I agree 100%. T-Will, any thoughts on this week's news from the Peak?
For me, I was thinking about the People Mover injuries. It's very, I mean, the People Mover has shown to be, well, it's a super efficient system, the linear induction motors, but also there, I guess because of maintenance issues, it's been, you kind of get those times where it kind of bumps into it. And I believe last time you guys said that there was something kind of foundational about the LIMs, I guess, compared to the drive tires at Disneyland. I still ultimately, whenever a bad story happens on the People Mover, it always kind of sticks my heart, because it is, I think, a wonderful attraction, an integral part of Tomorrowland. And
sure,
don't want to. It's kind of like seeing, an injury happen on Dumbo. It's like, no, please never happen.
Yeah, and it is very strange. I mean, again, links to all these articles will be down in the description as always if you'd like to read up on any of these things. But yeah, that has been this week's news from the Peak. Guys, that's the fastest we've ever...
In record time.
In record time, you guys. That's the fastest we've ever gotten through news from the Peak. So.
And look, does it feel like you guys are missing information? No. You're just missing us rambling on and on and on.
Exactly.
Isn't that amazing?
It's beautiful, guys. Can we get some subs in the chat for how fast it took us to get through that? Guys, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the second channel if you wouldn't like to miss any more live streams. But anyways, we do have some main topics today, some great main topics that I'm excited to get into. For our first main topic.
Test.
Yeah, this will be the ultimate test of how efficient we can be on this episode. But for our first main topic, I'm excited to get into this. Galaxy's Edge, originally supposed to be Tatooine and Endor. Those concepts were, or I guess those ideas were brought up this past week. And for our second bit, like always, we're going to go through our COVID-19 virus rundown news. Still don't have a good title for that. News of the week. And then finally, we're getting into our attraction retrospective. Now, there was no poll this week because we did decide that if we do ever have a guest on the show, it's the guest's choice to choose which attraction. And T-Will did choose a very great attraction for this week's attraction retrospective. So we're excited to get into that. Stay tuned till the end of the episode. But for our first bit here, our first main topic that I'm very excited to get into, Galaxy's Edge, like I said, was originally supposed to be Tatooine and Endor. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is only for the Hollywood Studios version, because that is the only part that's mentioned here. There is no mention from what I read of the Disneyland version, but so yeah, that's what we're going off of here. The former Walt Disney World Vice President Dan Cockrell stated on the Walt Disney World radio podcast that stop smiling, Jeremy. That original plans.
No, I'm just proud of you because we talked about pronunciation last night, and I'm just.
What can I say? What can I say except I did it. Anyways, yeah. So Mr. Dan did state on the Walt Disney World radio podcast that the original plans for the Star Wars land in Disney's Hollywood Studios. Plans for the land were placed on the new area of the park, which is currently Echo Lake and the Indiana Jones stunt show, as opposed to the current placement at the former Streets of America. So yeah, this does talk about different planned locations for Star Wars Land. Not going to call it Galaxy's Edge because I don't think that's what it would have been called, but WDWMagic.com does state that this change is supposedly controversial with fans, as many believe the Streets of America could have been used to expand Toy Story Land into a larger Pixar-themed area featuring Cars and Monsters, Inc. And of course, the Star Wars Land was also originally going to be based on the original trilogy planet of Tatooine, instead of being placed in the timeline of the new sequel trilogy. And the timeline shift was originally proposed by Lucasfilm boss Kathleen Kennedy, everybody's favorite Guys, I love Kathleen Kennedy. Don't you guys love Kathleen Kennedy? Before being okayed by Bob Iger. So yeah, this is very interesting news. This isn't really something that I expected to be surfaced, because I'm sure we can all say our collective thoughts on how we feel Galaxy's Edge works in the context of not just being a Star Wars themed land, but of course in the context of, immersion. But yeah, okay, let's go ahead and start with T-Will here. What are your thoughts on the original idea for Star Wars land supposedly being Tatooine and Endor, as opposed to creating a whole new planet, setting it in the new sequel trilogy here?
It reminds me of actually Harry Potter, and I think that's what they were going for, because it's an iconic part of the original trilogy, and it kind of feeds into the nostalgia of the originals. I mean, they're institutions at this point, the original trilogy, and it's not surprising that they do that. It's and how they would restructure it and still keep a lot of things like Streets of America. They were going to keep Muppets as well. It maybe would have landlocked it a little worse than Galaxy's Edge is, but I think if they went as gung ho with this as they did with Galaxy's Edge, with the same theme of Tatooine, I think it would have landed a little better, because the sequel trilogy has been seen as divisive, to say the least.
Sure.
A lot of people, and so seeing kind of like a what could have been, and instead they wanted to essentially be synergistic with the new trilogy, not focus on the old unless they want to bait you, essentially, to bring that term back. And this goes along with another thing that they mentioned just briefly, that they were actually going to work on that Monsters Inc. roller coaster was in the works back in like 2008, I believe, but it got scrapped pretty quickly. So it's interesting to see how many, because one thing that's also fascinating to me is that it seems like the Star Wars land was meant for Hollywood studios, but then I guess higher ups decided it should go to Disneyland as well, which brings to the question, like, which land does it fit better, Disneyland or Hollywood studios, in terms of like its structure and its like design and so forth. It's many answers have been raised, but also a lot of questions of like what could have been with a more traditional iconic IP land, I guess, compared to Galaxy's Edge, more bold choices.
Yeah, well, again, I'm not really sure if I would like necessarily seeing... I don't know. It's interesting. Jeremy, what are your thoughts here on the original ideas proposed for Star Wars land in Hollywood studios?
Yeah, I think it is interesting, and it just brings up the question of how do you make a land based on IP, and it's I'm kind of torn between the two, and it's hard to comment on something that we don't even have concept art for to see. But so it basically, I assume at that time, the line of thinking would have been, how do we, what are the worlds that people have an emotional connection to? Then how do you bring that to life in a theme park? Very old school design thinking in terms of integrating IP into the park. I'll give Galaxy's Edge, the current one, they went toward a route of, well, let's create a new planet, a new world within the Star Wars universe that can be active, a physical place active within the growing Star Wars universe. And I thought that was bold and interesting. Does it work 100%? No, I don't think so. It's because it really is a brand new concept in theme park design, really. So, it's interesting to entertain. I think Endor would have been kind of beautiful, actually. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see how their creative process started and where it ended. That's pretty much how I take that news.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and as T will also mention, there is an addition to this. Cockrell also mentioned canceled plans for a Monsters incorporated roller coaster themed to the door scene, but he personally turned it down as it did not fit the vision of the park's future, and he felt that the park did need more family rides, family-friendly rides, not necessarily thrill rides. So I'm guessing, yeah, this was a roller coaster themed, which I'm sure all of us Disney fans have asked, I'm sure, for this roller coaster theme to that scene from Monsters Inc. Because I do feel like that would be a great scene to theme a roller coaster to. I'm sure you guys can also agree.
It sounds like it was going to be. It sounds like it was going to be a re-theme of Rock and Roller Coaster, considering his reasoning for turning it down. So that's probably. So I don't know how I would have felt about that if it was just a re-theming of Rock and Roller Coaster.
Yeah, I do. I mean, yeah, that does sort of fit the bill, Rock and Roller Coaster. But I mean, I'm not necessarily I don't think there are any hardcore Rock and Roller Coaster fans out there, so I don't think they'd be angry at the retheme, in my opinion, at least. But yeah, I want to know, you guys as well in chat, what is your opinion on this? Galaxy's Edge originally supposed to be Tatooine and Endor. Would you have preferred the previous plan for Galaxy's Edge, or do you like the finished product? Now, I'm sure us, speaking collectively here, at least for me, there are flaws for Galaxy's Edge that I have. Not a lot of movement in the land, not a lot of walk-around characters in the land, and of course, there's only 2 real attractions in the land. How big? 14 acres, I think, is how big the lands are. Around there. That's the first number that came to mind. 14 acres and only 2 attractions. No real shows or anything. No real walk-around characters besides like the... you have Chewbacca. I think you have R2-D2 now.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh my gosh, Siri just like recorded all of... Oh my gosh. She was like... I was like typing an essay to her, but anyways. Yeah, so there are flaws with Galaxy's Edge. I'm not necessarily sure if those flaws would have persisted if these original plans were to go through. Someone said in chat, Endor would have been better for shade. I do agree with that as well. Yeah, and also Jeremy said Endor would have been much more beautiful, much more beautiful. I think that's how you phrase it. But yeah, so Jeremy, did you have something that you would like to add here? It looked like you did.
Oh yeah, it did look like I did, and I did. What did you say? That made me think that. Oh yeah, I don't know. I think lack of kinetic energy, visual kinetic energy, seems to be kind of a problem in kind of all modern theme park design that I think I take issue with. So I don't know. Maybe that would have probably persisted too. I just think it would have been so cool. I mean, I don't need to get into it, but I just think a Star Wars land with so much visual motion would have been so cool. Anyway,
I agree. No, yeah, I agree 100%. Nate said that
it's more.
Oh, go on, Timo.
Go ahead. Well, I was about to say, I think it comes down to the fact that they want to create the landmarks themselves, and the idea of connect, and like the immersion comes from the land, from the detail and the lands themselves, not so much the vibe and the feel of the area. It seems like.
Yeah.
If I put it, that's the best way I could really put it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and Nate in chat said it also would have been better to set the land in the original trilogy as opposed to the sequel trilogy. I want to hear what you guys have to say about that as well. I'm sure we've talked about this in the past, but there are, at least for me, there are flaws when it comes to theming the land around the sequel trilogy. Again, there are pros and cons that we can discuss from Disney's point of view as well. A pro would be they're not landlocked into the specific prequel or the specific original trilogy when it comes to like the characters. For the new trilogy, you can always keep adding on new characters. I think there was discussion of maybe even adding the Mandalorian meet and greet in Galaxy's Edge at some point a while back, but even then, that was back in the original trilogy as well. So yeah, it is very interesting. Not a lot of people are fans of the new that's really hard to say, sequel trilogy films. There we go. Not a lot of people are necessarily fans of those films, are very decisive, from the Skywalker saga to even like what was like Rogue One was like just horrible. I hated Rogue One. Solo, But
Oh, really?
I wasn't a fan of Rogue One.
I really enjoyed it.
I haven't seen it in a
Rogue One.
while. Well,
I've never seen it, but Rise of Skywalker was that was a mess. But this isn't, we're not a Star Wars channel, here to hear the dunk on Kathleen Kennedy.
I mean, I could talk at length about how I dislike Rise of Skywalker, but we can save that for another episode. So yeah, I want to hear, Jeremy, what are your thoughts on even possibly theming a Star Wars land to not the sequel trilogy, but to the original trilogy? I do, at least personally, I do feel like there's a lot more connection to theming it to the original trilogy. You can have, and especially, you can't have a Darth Vader walk-around character if you theme it in the sequel trilogy, because in the canon, Darth Vader's dead. So you can't be walking around unless they paint him blue and he's like a ghost Darth Vader. But then again, that wouldn't go with the canon either. So Jeremy, what are your thoughts on possibly theming the Star Wars land to the original trilogy instead of the sequel trilogy, like what we got?
Well, I think it's totally doable, and I think they've purposely created a land that's supposed to be flexible in terms of growing, being active with the current timeline.
Yeah.
Eventually they're going to abandon that idea anyway, just because of upkeep and stuff like that. So I wouldn't, I think it's totally possible for a specific period of time, all of a sudden we can visit a Batuu that takes place in the original trilogy. So I mean, listen, they did that with Star Tours. Basically, it was the original trilogy that it took place in, and then with Adventure Continues, it took place in the prequel trilogy, and then it became this weird high. I guess the Star Speeder was a time machine because you would just jump around.
Yeah,
and didn't make any sense at all.
It became a billboard.
But, exactly. They can totally do that. I think they're, even though at the very kind of face-to-face eye level right in front, there's a lot of detail there. Overall, it's a pretty neutral feeling land where you can kind of project, I think, whatever timeline you want to by just changing a couple banners here and there, and some walk around characters and stuff like that.
T-Will, anything to add?
Not really. I mean, just I think it's I think overall it was a very, very interesting that was their initial plans, and I wonder, you can only speculate if that would have been preferable to what we got in the end.
Sure.
You'll never really know.
Yeah, I mean, like T-Will said, you never really know. Only in our imaginations will we be able to visit this Tatooine and Endor. I don't know, Tatooine would have been kind of boring because it's all just white, beige, and not a lot of visual stuff that you can really.
You could have thrown in Mos Eisley a lot of kinetic energy just on that front, but again, we're just speculating at this point.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily complaining. Galaxy's Edge is beautiful, in my opinion, at least visually, from the detail that they've put in. But yeah, it is very interesting. And then I want to briefly touch on this as well, the Monsters, Inc. roller coaster. I would have loved to see a Monsters, Inc. themed roller coaster, because the only Monsters, Inc. attraction in the entire Disney parks the one in California Adventure?
No.
There's
one in Tokyo.
Yeah, that's it, and that's more Toy Story Mania-esque. Really fun ride. It's a ride and go seek.
Oh,
Shine
that's
a flashlight
right.
And just a lot of interactivity. Really, really well done.
Yeah, no, that's right. That completely slipped my mind. Well, I haven't experienced that attraction, so in my mind, the only Monsters Inc. ride I've ever experienced is the one in California Adventure. That ride is horrible. It's awful. Don't go on that ride, you guys. Even since they added Fast Pass, don't go on that ride. So it would be nice to see the film done justice, at least in the American parks, when it comes to representing the franchise, because Monsters Inc. is a great movie, whether or not you like the second one or not. But yeah, it would be very nice to see a roller coaster themed to the door scene. Like I said, I've always wanted to. A lot of people have wanted to experience that, but I think that is going to wrap up our first topic of the day, unless you guys have any thoughts you'd like to add on. Oh, there's the laugh floor. That's right. Justin said the laugh floor, Walt Disney World. I guess.
There's the laugh floor. How can we forget
the fact that we forgot about it explains everything.
That's true. I mean, it's kind of like a sit-down experience. I wouldn't call it like well, anyways, unless you guys have any thoughts, I think it is time to move on to our second topic of the day. And you guys know what that means. Our second topic of the day, it's time for the virus-related news.
The COVID rundown.
The COVID rundown. Here we go.
This week on Matterhorn Monday, Matt and company continue their reports and discussions on COVID-19 and its impact on the Disney company around the world.
So good.
People Mover music, you guys.
Not COVID.
Oh, yeah, of course. All right, well, anyways, we do have some headlines that we would like to read down to you here, and then we do have one actual bit of news that we would like to further expand on here. So for our first headline, Hong Kong Disneyland reportedly testing reopening procedures. I think in last week's episode, we touched on Shanghai Disneyland trying to do the same thing, going through the rundown, so it seems like Hong Kong Disneyland is reportedly going through the same procedures. So we'll see how that goes in the future. Second headline here, Walt Disney World begins canceling Villains After Hours events into July. So if you guys had any faith that the parks would possibly reopen in time for the Villains After Hours events in July, I mean, I don't know who was excited for that, but for those people who were.
I don't even know it. I don't really even know what that is.
I don't even know either.
Have you ever heard of the Disney After Hours? Essentially, it's a new thing where it's a ticketed event where they have a limited amount of people into the parks from like 8 till midnight, if I recall correctly. It's on a special nights, and of course, I think it was like $125 for those few hours of short lines.
I don't think personally. I don't think the price is worth it.
But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like an upcharge, like ticketed event to essentially monetize an extra magic hour.
Sure.
Event.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it. But yeah, Walt Disney World begins canceling Villains After Hours events into July. So that does give you guys a good hint into whether or not Disney is expecting the parks to reopen that time. I mean, I guess they could reopen before then and just have the event canceled. But anyways, nonetheless, moving on. Final headline here. Walt Disney World begins canceling reservations through May 23rd. I think the last time we touched on this 2 episodes ago, maybe. They canceled from May 15th, May 16th, around that. I can't remember specifically, but it seems like almost every week they are canceling reservations for the next week moving forward. So, excuse me. So yeah, again, my Panda Express came back, almost jumped out of my mouth from my stomach. Wouldn't that have been something on stream? But anyways, you guys don't want to talk about that. You guys want to talk about the limited park capacities, mandated employee face masks, and more discussed during Orange County, Florida Economic Recovery Task Force meeting. So this is the COVID virus news that we're going to actually touch on in depth here. So yeah, there is a link in the description below to the laughingplace.com for the specific guidelines, which I will also read down here in a bit. And I'd also like to note that these are not guidelines released by Disney themselves. These are just, at least from what I've read, these are the guidelines that were just sort of proposed to just the general, I think, theme park area in Orange County. So yeah, these were not done by Disney themselves. I just wanted to go ahead and make that known here. So I'd like to run down these guidelines that were discussed here. So let's see. Large theme parks, Disney, Universal, Some of the guidelines: tape marking of 6 feet apart in ride/attraction queues, staff to regularly wipe down surfaces at random. And then it says here, phase 1 and 2, staff who are 65 plus are encouraged to stay at home. And then there are mandates here as well. All employees required to wear face masks, touchless hand sanitizer at each ticketing entry and turnstiles, touchless hand sanitizer at each ride/attraction entry and exit, temperature checks for staff prior to shift. Temp above 100 and 100.4 must not enter premises, and then wipe down of all railing and surfaces regularly. And again, here it says phase 1 for 50% capacity, and then moving forward, phase 2, 75% capacity, or is the only capacity that, from these mandates, for these proposed mandates, that Disney, Universal, it says this is for large theme parks. Those are the capacity that they would have to operate under for phase 1 and phase 2. So yeah, again, I would like to discuss this at length for 3 hours. Jeremy, what are your thoughts here on these new mandates that were proposed to these theme parks following once they initially or eventually reopen?
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely makes sense, especially in the period before we have a vaccine, probably a year from now. So that makes sense when everything has to be open, and but we still, the coronavirus isn't completely eradicated and we don't have a vaccine yet. So all of that makes sense. The temperature checks, a lot of medical experts are starting to express that is not actually a good gauge about who should or who should not be allowed to be in a public place, because temperature spikes. You could have COVID and your temperature spiked an hour before and then it totally dropped down, and that you'll be allowed to go through a Disney park. And also people get temperatures for various reasons. Again, I've said it enough on this show. Temperature checks, I don't think, are a good gauge about who should and who shouldn't be allowed to be in a public place. Anyway, so we'll see how that evolves. But it makes sense, in a pre-vaccine but post-lockdown world, which will probably start approaching that late summer, probably. Yeah, it's going to make sense, that large places like this, even if they're even allowed to reopen, that of course will be at the discretion of Disney. People are going to have to wear masks. The hand sanitizer makes sense. That's probably just more for people's sanity. But yeah, I mean, they're taking those are the mandates that are going to be kind of standard until everything gets under control, when we have a vaccine and everyone is vaccinated. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, Mr. T. Will, what are your thoughts here on these proposed mandates for these bigger theme parks in Orange County in Florida?
They make sense. It's generally about keeping the safety as much as possible, and so reopening the economy across the board. And this Florida is kind of one of the states that's trying to push hard to get back to reopening everything, along with like Texas and Georgia especially. I think Georgia's the biggest.
Oh gosh,
like,
don't even get me started on Texas.
Okay, but seeing them take these steps, but also leaving it up to Disney's discretion. These are just what will be the minimum guidelines for them. They could be more strict. They could they might even just give up on the quarter and just like cut their losses and wait until much later, which one could maybe indicate with the after hours ticketed things, maybe, but that could just be a nothing thing. So ultimately it's trying to figure out how to be safe, but also bringing the money back into the economy in a good way. So it's one thing I wonder is how you're going to set up the 50 and 70% capacity. I imagine that's only going to be for like first come first serve, and also priority to annual pass holders and hotel guests. I would imagine are going to be the big ones Disney World will have to actually pay attention to 8Ps for a while again.
Got Yeah, someone did say in chat how they're gonna mandate the first come or the 50%, 75% capacity. Like T will mention, first come, first serve, and yeah, you could imagine that they would be giving priority to the hotel guests, of course, because they are paying more to stay on property at Walt Disney World. But I mean, are you really going to be seeing a lot of people in the hotels anyways when the parks reopen? I don't really think that a lot of people from out of town, from out of state, from out of country are going to be traveling in to stay at hotels from the parks just to, stay safe for at least a few months. I mean, again,
you'd be surprised. Some people, when the opportunity in some way to experience Disney,
sure,
I think people will pounce on that immediately, and sometimes with I can't think now, but you know what I mean, with even if the risks are a little high, people need to see that castle.
I need to see the castle, guys. I miss Disneyland so much. I only got to use my annual pass I bought last December. I've only got to use it once since then, which is kind of...
And life just decided to nay-nay you.
Yeah, I just got nay-nayed by life, you guys. I'm in utter shock and disbelief. I'm probably not even going to get to use it again until I have to renew it again in December, or whenever they extend my renewal date to. But, that's neither here nor there. And again, I would like to stress that these were not proposed by Disney. These guidelines were not proposed by Disney themselves. Right. This was brought up at the discussion at the meeting. So yeah, this
was also I believe Josh D'Amaro, the president of Disney World, was in there. So this was Disney, Universal, all the big players for Orange County, Florida, played a huge role in getting to some guidelines that they all agreed to.
Yeah, and when we're even going to be seeing the official, I don't know when we're going to be seeing the official guidelines from Disney when they do release those. We'll play it by ear as we've been doing for the past however many weeks it's been. Guys, time has no meaning anymore to me. It's just go to sleep, wake up, eat.
God, it's going by so fast.
It really is. May did go by really fast, or not May. Oh my gosh. April really went by fast, you guys. It's really shocking. Kind of crazy. But before we do move on, I'd like to showcase this picture that someone sent to me on Twitter in honor of Alex's birthday, which was yesterday on the 5th. On the 2nd.
Love that.
Saturday, the 2nd of May was Alex's birthday. So yesterday for us recording today. It would have been last week for you guys listening. But yeah, happy birthday, Alex the Historian. This is from Ryan Hands at SpongeBotLOL5 on Twitter.
Oh.
Yeah, real cute there. It has his logo. It has the little happy birthday button as well. And then Dory. I don't know if Alex likes cars or Finding Nemo, but it's cute nonetheless. So thank you. Shout out to Mr. Ryan Hands, who I think is in chat. Who I think is in chat as well. So yeah, I'll go and tweet that at Alex as well. He'll you could have just tweeted it at him and not me, and he would have seen it first before I did. But that's okay. We appreciate it. And yeah, happy late birthday to Alex. Sad he's not able to join us here on the stream today, but guys, go give Alex some love for real. This whole situation is affecting everybody, not just us. It's affecting Alex as well. Yeah, subscribe to Alex. Go follow him on Twitter. Tweet him some love, you guys. But before we do, I think, are we done with all of our main topics, you guys? Is that really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm just reeling right now because I'm so excited to hear about Puckermint.
Guys, it's that time again. We'll be right back. Oh, I pushed the button too early. Oh my gosh, that's embarrassing. I pushed the button too early, you guys. We'll be right back.
You should have just kept it.
I should have just kept it, yeah. Well, anyways, we'll be back for our attraction retrospective right after we hear a brief word from the channels, from the show's sponsors. If you guys are wondering where you can find even more family-friendly live streams just like this one, head on over to theliveplace.com. The Live Place is your headquarters for great family-friendly live streams. They cover anything from Disney to other vacation spots, various variety shows, and have some amazing streamers like Resort TV 1 and myself. Also, be sure to check out puckermint.com, where you can find amazing pins and stickers. Puckermint is based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, just a few hours from where I live. And since I'm a big believer in supporting local artists, we decided to partner up. Be sure to use the coupon code down below when you make your next order. Again, that's puckermint.com and puckermint on Instagram. It's time for our favorite attraction, Retrospective. And like I said, we did not put out a poll this week for today's episode because we did decide it would be a good idea to have whenever we have guests on the show, it'd be nice to have them choose an attraction for us to spotlight. So, Mr. T. Will, what is your pick for this week's attraction retrospective? If we don't already know, us too.
I've chosen the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror.
Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, you guys. We touched on this, I think, briefly the previous episode for when we talked about Indiana Jones Adventure. So I'm very excited to get into a proper discussion about everybody's favorite haunted hotel, haunted elevator, whatever you guys want to call it. So since this is T. Will's attraction retrospective, let's go ahead and have him sort of start off this conversation here, T. Will.
So yeah, Hollywood. So back when Disney MGM Studios opened up, it was a quaint park, kind of menial park, I guess you could kind of call it. There was not a whole lot to do, a lot of shows, a lot of restaurants, but not too many attractions. I think you could only do the tram tour and great movie ride in the beginning, but then a few months later, Star Tours came in. But it was still enough of a success to expand upon it, and that's when the idea of Sunset Boulevard came in. Another piece of kind of old time 1930s Hollywood brought to life in a Disney way, but figuring out what that end of the street should be. Should it be should it be a Disney thing? Should it be something? What should it be? And so soon enough, they landed the idea of, well, we should do horror, because horror is a huge piece of cinema, from Frankenstein to The Exorcist and so forth. It's to do a land of Hollywood without horror, even if it's Disney, is inadequate. So they came up with many ideas, mainly focusing on like castles. Like one of them was Young Frankenstein, the classic monster parody of the Frankenstein movies by Mel Brooks. That soon evolved into Hotel Mel, again, haunted hotel with Mel Brooks as your guide. So pretty jokey, most likely, considering Brooks's repertoire. But soon enough, the project fell through. But they still kept at this idea of a haunted castle, haunted hotel, and that soon was figuring out the exact theme of it. And then they landed on the Twilight Zone, the classic 1960s supernatural sci-fi. Absolutely, the supernatural sci-fi series from Rod Serling. So they
just that, one of the greatest television series of all time.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. When it comes to really, really impactful on American television. So they got to work with that idea, and essentially from the Twilight Zone, everything kind of fell into place of how each piece should go together, and it soon opened up in June, I believe, or July of 1994, along with the rest of Sunset Boulevard, and it became, or maybe a little later for Sunset Boulevard, but essentially the whole area was complete, and it became an immediate hit. And it's seen some updates and a few changes, and then also with success comes expansions and clones across not just Florida, but also to California, to Paris, and finally to Tokyo.
All right. Thank you, Mr. T. Will. I thought my mic was muted for a second. It's not. You guys can hear me. So thank you, Mr. T. Will, for giving that rundown of Tower of Terror. People are saying in chat, Guardian's better than Tower of Terror. That's kind of, I guess we'll get into that discussion.
We'll get into that. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that.
We can sort of have that conversation, because obviously you know, if I were comparing Guardians to Florida's Tower of Terror, I just think the winner is very clear. Anyway, we don't have to talk about that now.
But I mean, yeah. So it's a lot of firsts for Disney, but also a lot of like just first for I think theme parks, and it's really, I would say, one of the like masterpieces of the second generation of
Sure.
of Imagineering. So you know this is part of the repertoire of Splash Mountain, Disneyland Paris, even Tokyo Disney Sea, and Indiana Jones. This is really part of the apex of their craft.
Absolutely. You know, I don't know if you watched the stream where Matt and I talked about Indiana Jones, T-Will, but Matt had made a really excellent point. I know, shocker. Where
it's rare, you guys, but it
where
happened.
he said he equates Indiana Jones Adventure. That he said that was the second generation Imagineers Pirates of the Caribbean. That was an excellent point, and it got me thinking. Does that mean Tower of Terror is like their haunted mansion?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's evidently clear, especially when you compare it to the two and their impacts, and it really does. And it's interesting because this is really this along with Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter was really was part of the kind of last wave of Disney doing horror.
Sure.
And it's kind of, and it is sad to see them kind of back away from that and not explore that realm because of the restriction of their brand. You know, they feel like they have to be friendly when even Walt experimented with that stuff. I mean, Haunted Mansion, they make, you know, the stretching room ends on a suicide.
Yeah.
so
the only
go on.
I was gonna say the only people who've restricted the Disney brand is Disney themselves. I mean, their brand is, I think, you know, encompasses so many things, which is why, you know, they're so, you know, it's such a great company with such a rich history. And I think for some reason, as time went on with different leadership, they felt they had to like streamline their brand even more. And I think it's kind of been at a creative cost.
Yeah,
not kind of. I think it has been at a creative cost.
I think it's a fear of backlash. I think especially after the Alien Encounter backlash for the Magic Kingdom, I think they shied away, at least especially in the parks, on that, and then they kind of, because they embraced their association with just children instead of, you know, exploring art and being, you know, entertainment for everybody, which is what was handed down from the Golden Age and even the Renaissance. A willingness to take more risks. I think just they feel like they can get away with just being simple and taking out more I would say in-depth stuff to something like, oh, we'll get into it.
That's another conversation for another time. But let's, Matt, ask some questions about
Okay, so yeah,
Tower.
we can talk about we are talking about the Tower of Terror. One of like Jeremy said, the second gen Imagineers Haunted Mansion, which is kind of weird because they're both like spooky, both have a lot of cobwebs. I don't know. Well, anyways, yeah, the Tower of Terror is one of my personal favorite attractions. I'm really sad that it left California Adventure, but we'll get into that later on in the discussion, like you guys said. So, Mr. T-Will, what is it about Tower of Terror that just tickles your fancy, T-Will? That's kind of a weird way to phrase that, but what is it about Tower of Terror? Is it the theming? Is it the ride system? Because this, I think a few weeks ago, we did touch that this ride system, as well as Indiana Jones, was one of the first of its kind, I think, when it came to trackless, that style of trackless, when it comes to like combining the two ride vehicles, ride systems, I should say. So T-Will, yeah, what is it about the Tower of Terror that just makes you adore and gush and go gaga eyes over the ride?
For me, Tower of Terror, it's really just it's a fully complete package and a complete idea that it's like, and how each piece, just from stepping into Sunset Boulevard, plays right into it when you just turn into that street and you just see the tower right there at the end. Kind of playing on that idea of like, this, the spooky house at the end of the street, the last house on the left, that you're never supposed to go, and it draws you towards that. And so immediately the story is being told just from the hub of Hollywood studios, really. And with that, you then are treated into something that is extremely atmospheric, and every piece, I think, just feeds into each other perfectly. Like, a drop tower attraction really, goes perfectly with horror. It's something that it's that fear of technology that we use all day coming back and destroy and harming us. It's kind of the same reason, Jaws, we use the ocean every day, and then something coming to destroy that harmonious friendship is kind of that same idea. So it taps into that, to something, I think, primal within its ride design, and then also having it wrapped around something that as impactful as the Twilight Zone gives it the air of the supernatural. It gives it something, it heightens it in a way that makes it really stand out. And I think also it also preserves the Twilight Zone in a lot of ways, because this was my introduction to the television series through this attraction.
Me too.
And it kind of led me down a path of watching some of those original episodes and seeing really the craftsmanship of them. So it's just something that works just harmoniously within, not only, it's kind of like Flight of Passage, but I think done much stronger, where every piece of the land is tied to where its placement in the land ties so perfectly within that section. Sure. And you can't, a Sunset Boulevard without the Tower of Terror is completely empty. And and the ride system is just fun, and also, again, forward thinking with the AGV system. So this, when it comes to the Hollywood Studios version, I think it's really a perfect package and something that should never ever be tampered with too much, honestly.
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on the theme of the attraction, but before we do that, I'd like to hear Jeremy's thoughts. Why Tower of Terror is one of his favorite attractions in this discussion here.
I think it's totally the atmosphere. I agree completely with T. Will. It's one of those great attractions where, and I think I mentioned this with Indiana Jones, I think it's more so the case with this ride, where the ride for me, and I think for everybody, begins when you decide that that's what you're going to go on. Doesn't matter where you are in the park. For me, the experience begins when I know I'm going to be I'm making my way toward Tower of Terror. And then when you turn on Sunset Boulevard, for me, that is the beginning of the ride.
Sure.
Seeing it and walking toward it, and from afar, getting close to it, then you're walking up the misty garden. It's all a part of it's a holistic experience. And the funny thing is I was terrified of, well, not terrified, but I used to chicken out, when I was a kid, when we'd go on, don't give me that look. When we'd go on Tower of Terror, but I still I still considered it one of my all-time favorites at the time, because the elevator part is not the full experience. I loved walking through that queue and going through the lobby and going in the library and seeing the pre-show almost more than the ride itself. And that was me doing the up and down, in case anybody noticed. Could look very weird. So yeah, and I think that is a successful attraction, that it's not just the sitting on the ride and experiencing the thrill of going up and down. I know many people who, I don't like the up and down, but I love Tower of Terror. It's because, and that's just the mark of great Disney a great Disney attraction. Is it's more than just the thrill of the ride system. It is how everything is integrated in telling a story, and it's a great example of that. And yeah, I agree. A Sunset Boulevard without a Tower of Terror does not a Sunset Boulevard make.
Yeah, and that's kind of, when we think about it in terms of a whole story with Tower of Terror, really the kind of climax is the ride itself, but you're peeping from the beginning of the beginning, the inciting incident is seeing the tower, and then kind of leading into that, and then the build up to
Precisely.
the ride, and so it's kind of the reward for going through the experience is going through a very frightening and exciting experience of the tower, and the technology used on it is still fascinating, especially when you know that it was made that they hired an actual elevator company to help design the elevators themselves, which is funny. It's like, you know all this hard work that you do on it and all of the technology they use on these elevators, we're going to use it in a way that we're going to use it in the opposite way that was intended for, and it works beautifully on it.
Well, I guess before we get into the theme, we can touch on the ride system or the ride experience of the attraction, because like you guys did say, this ride experience for a lot of us does start when you first decide to get on the attraction. Of course, the queue does play a big part in the attraction as well. This is another one of my all-time favorite queues as well. I think a few episodes ago we talked about how Indiana Jones Adventure was one of my favorite queues as well. So yeah, this is up there. Adds a lot of the atmosphere. I'd like to talk about the pre-show video, that iconic, at least in my opinion, it's iconic, the pre-show video of I can't remember which specific episode they had to sort of cut together the footage of Rod Sterling to do it.
Yeah, I know it as well. It's a great episode. It's called It's a Good Life.
I think I remember that. Yeah, It's a Good Life.
It's a great episode.
And I'd also like to touch on the person who actually does the voice for Rod Serling. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he does.
Silverman.
That's it, Mark Silverman. That's it. He does a fantastic job at impersonating. Him.
Rod Serling.
So shout out to Mark if he's watching. Probably not. But yeah, is this one of the first instances which we've seen sort of that pre-show video used in the context of like conveying the story of the attraction, the experience of the attraction,
like exposition?
In the queue? Sure, exposition, yeah, in that sort of fashion.
Well,
it might be.
Well, Star Tours kind of. Well, no, actually, no. Star Tours just had the safety spiel.
It's a safety video.
Yeah, it was a safety video. But you then Indiana Jones kind of had that, and it's kind of mixed in with a safety spiel sort of.
Oh,
so
sure. Yeah.
But that's along the way. It doesn't, and it's a continuous reel. This is more of like kind of that, I guess, that trope of sit down, watch it, and get the experience. But I think that decision really works with. I think it makes the most sense with the Tower of Terror because it puts you in the mood of the Twilight Zone, and it also. I don't know. It doesn't come off as kind of tacky as some other attractions that utilize the kind of pre-show video utilize as well, like Flight of Passage. I mean, wonderful attraction, but sometimes those preview videos can get really.
Yeah, it's like 15 pre-shows, and then you.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I'm on the ride. Oh God, it started. Okay.
All right. Well, now, yeah, gotta love that pre-show video. It's, at least for me, it's iconic. It's one of my favorite. It was one of my favorite parts of watching it, at least in the California version, up until they got rid of it. I'd like to touch on the theme, the Twilight Zone theme of this attraction. Do you guys think this attraction would have worked without the Twilight Zone tie-in? Do you think the Imagineers could have found a way to make it as effective as it is currently without the IP?
It's
a good question.
I would say. I mean, it depends because this is something that we'll get into with different versions. But Tokyo does not have the Twilight Zone theme at all. It is,
Right.
and that's
Right.
because Japan never got the Twilight Zone, so it was never in the cultural zeitgeist. So they had to come up with something completely new and different for that, and I think it still works.
Sure.
Especially for the land that it's in, the American waterfront. It does a great job in that sense. So it is it's a yes and a no. I mean, I think
Right.
the fact that they touched on the Twilight Zone and it really informed them on how to place every piece together, I think makes it important for the Tower of Terror to be the success that it is. But I think Tokyo shows the flexibility of the tower and how a horror themed drop tower dark ride is strong enough on its own that you can play with it more and try something different.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, well said. Yeah, it would be very interesting to see a version of because there was talk, I think, a while back, a few years ago, about possibly removing the Twilight Zone theme from, I can't remember if it was from the Walt Disney World version or even from the California version. It might have been both. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was talk of that, and I was interested to see how that would have...
That's been something that has been thrown around for forever.
Yeah.
You know, how long is Disney going to want to pay CBS for the rights to the Twilight Zone? And I believe, now, didn't they change... Doesn't Florida have a new... Is it still Twilight Zone, or did they get rid of the Twilight Zone?
They never changed it in Florida.
I'm sorry, I meant to say Paris.
Paris, there was a little event that went for that kind of removed the Twilight Zone theme, but it still kept the idea of the haunted the haunted hotel and the lightning strike and all that stuff. So they did. That's another example of them kind of forking off of the Twilight Zone theming. So so they've definitely been toying with the idea of getting rid of it, and if it does happen, I think it'll be sad to see it go. But I think as long as they still keep true to the spirit of the attraction, to the spirit of the Twilight Zone, I think the attraction will still stay strong, because again, Tokyo stays true to the spirit of the Twilight Zone, even though it has nothing to do with it, and still succeeds in its own right.
Yeah. All right. I completely forgot about that Paris thing. Yeah. So still in my mind. Now, I guess it's time to move the conversation to the different versions that exist around the world. More specifically, I want to talk about the California version, which I believe the California version was initially a clone from Paris, or was it the other way around? It might have been the other way around.
So no, actually, I can explain this. This was actually the source on this is mainly from the wonderful Martin Bidds. You guys should check out his videos. In terms of historian and preservation on this, I mean, he's the alpha and the omega. You know, he does absolutely brilliant work.
Yeah.
So he touched on this. So Disneyland Paris when Walt Disney Studios Park was being set up, it was deprived of a lot of necessities. So it became even more bare bones than MGM Studios was, and more of a joke than DCA was when it first opened. So, but from the beginning, they had this little cafe that had iconography of the Hollywood Tower Hotel. So it was set in stone, and the plans were being set that Paris was going to get a Tower of Terror. But because DCA was DCA at that time, they had to find some way of getting. They had to find some quick way of getting people into the park. So they're like, we'll just take this from Paris and plop it over here into Hollywood to California Adventure, and then economic issues pretty much kicked Disneyland Paris down to the ground again, and so that project was then delayed until 2007. So it was designed for Paris. It's kind of like what happened with I think Big Thunder Mountain. I think that was initially designed for Magic Kingdom, like the finalized version.
Very,
but it was started and completed in Disneyland first.
Yeah, so just to recap, Paris is the clone of DCA.
DCA is a Paris was first. Paris was designed first.
Oh,
Planned for
DCA
Paris,
got it first.
DCA got it first.
Okay.
Yeah.
There it is. End of the episode. Just kidding. But yeah, so
well,
so yeah, I would like to touch on the California version, especially the fact that it was rethemed to Guardians of the Galaxy, and there was discussion here in the chat that Guardians is better, that they thought Guardians was better than Tower of Terror, which I'm sure you can make an argument for. But yeah,
one thing I want to go ahead. Sorry.
I guess just in terms of like the versatility of the ride system, because you can, of course, it's themed to the Hollywood Tower Hotel. Elevator, haunted elevator, lightning strikes, you go up and down. But then, of course, Joe Rohde took that, flipped it on its head, turned it into a Marvel attraction, whether or not we like it or not. I do miss the original Tower of Terror, but Guardians is a decent attraction. It's got its flaws, but I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on the fact that our Tower of Terror was stripped away, or I guess in terms of like my hometown park, our Tower of Terror was stripped away and taken from us. So I think Jeremy, let's go ahead and start with Jeremy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it's interesting because my first tower experience was in Florida, and I remember feeling the anticipation watching the DCA tower rise, and when it was under construction, and it was really an exciting thing. It was, people still consider Tower of Terror to be sort of a crown jewel of like the new state-of-the-art Disney attraction, and everyone was really excited to get Tower of Terror in DCA. Personally, I remember feeling disappointed with DCA's tower when it opened, simply because it did feel like it felt like Tower of Terror light.
Sure.
In a way. It still set up atmosphere enough, the bare minimum, but not as well as Florida. Of course, one of the most thrilling moments, even though it wasn't exactly what the Imagineers had in mind, but the thrill of the fifth dimension scene in Florida was completely eliminated for California. I don't think California does the Twilight Zone essence as justice as much as Florida does. That being said, it was still a solid experience, beloved as well. And it's just a great concept, even though it was kind of like Tower of Terror Jr. But that being said, it's hard to actually. I know we consider Guardians a re-theme, but it's not. It's just using the infrastructure to create a new attraction. It's hard to, and it's a completely different experience. It's hard to compare the two.
Sure.
Guardians, Tower of Terror is designed to build tension, and with Guardians, it's designed to build for adventure. And I think the kind of it doesn't do a good job of building toward adventure. But you listen, Guardians is a party. That's kind of like what you're supposed to get from it. It's a blast. It's a party. It's fun. I have no idea what's going on, and I don't know if it's as good at establishing a sense of story and experience that Tower of Terror that its predecessor did, even in its lighter form. And I think this is just Imagineering's trying to figure out a way to actually create plot in attractions, and I think it's actually weakening an overall attraction experience. I think they'll get it eventually because it is an interesting avenue to go down, but I don't think Guardians is a prime example of it's another one of those and here's where you come in attractions.
Literally, that's the literal phrase that Rocket Raccoon.
That's why I use that line.
Yeah,
that's where I can't do the voice, but.
Don't
anyways.
do it.
I want to kind of step back a bit for California's Tower of Terror, and that the ride system, because the fifth dimension scene is really a showstopper for Florida's version, and but it became but it became an operations nightmare in some aspects. It made the attraction a little bit more unstable. Like if you sneeze on the floor, the ride will go down during that part. Yeah, so don't drop your hat on that part. You'll just be a bad person for doing that.
Yeah.
But what the newer, what the 2.0 version, I guess you could call it, of Tower, it makes it much more efficient. I think capacity wise, it has much more, it has a higher throughput, but it does bring up the question.
You have 6 elevators.
Essentially, yeah. Whereas it's 3 towers with three loading bays, whereas in Florida it's 2 towers with 4 loading bays. But it does bring up the question of whether you're making something efficient and where's the line when it comes to efficiency and capacity throughput, and then making a showstopper, because that's been the ultimate question. Like, some newer rides have been, pushing brand new technology and being absolute showstoppers, but their capacity is like 3 an hour. And it's like, is that really like, so and Tower is one of the outliers in which the tech is more unstable and has lower capacity, but that experience is strong enough to make it really the superior version, the original being the superior version. So that's always, so it makes you wonder where that line of show stopping and efficiency really is in terms of an attraction. But I think Tower of Terror was seen as a turning point for DCA to be at least a place to visit for more than
10 minutes.
10 minutes. You go down. You go to Soarin' for 10 minutes,
and you leave.
Yeah, exactly.
That's literally what my family did for years.
That's what
you want to go on Soarin'. Okay, then we'll go have lunch and go back into Disneyland.
Yeah, that was.
And you know what? We still do that.
That kind of, so it's interesting on that front, and it does enough on its own to be a fine attraction. Like if we didn't have the original version and that was the first version, I think people would be much kinder to it, because it would be still stand on its own as being cool and unique. But I think because the idea was more fully realized in Florida, it really does seem meek in comparison. When it comes to Guardians, I think the biggest issue for me is what I was saying before, in which the Tower is a complete package. Like, from the detail, from the theme of itself to the ride system, everything works perfectly. And I think when you think critically of what would best fit of a ride system and how it would best fit an attraction, I think is extremely critical. A boat ride through a Caribbean town being ransacked by pirates, that just works perfectly. A spaceship sending you a roller coaster, send you through the far reaches of the galaxy, that works perfectly. But taking something, Guardians, I think, doesn't really achieve that, because a drop tower is more so on, again, the side of the fear and the primal instinct of falling and people and reliable and ordinary tech going wrong. That's something that Tower exploited beautifully in there. But Guardians goes in a different direction of being more about the party, but how does that fit with a drop tower? That's why Guardians does not go with drop towers, I don't think. So that's one aspect of it. And I think overall it's an attraction that has a vibe, and and it's fine. I just think it's something that it feels, it's not an experience. I think that's really at the core of it, is that it's a ride. It's not an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is like the other like its older brother in Florida, and like it is in Tokyo, and like, you know, and again, like other attractions, you know, Pirate Space, Haunted Mansion, really attractions that we hold dear and beloved is not because they're rides, but because they're experiences in and of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Guardians, in sacrificing the horror elements of the attraction in order to cram in this sleeper hit IP. I think ultimately it's that IP confinement in which they were forced to cram it into something that does not fit them, and it does it fine. You know, it's fun to do, but I think overall it's like junk food. It's like, you know, whereas Tower, I think, is like a more sustenance meal. That's where I would say, for me personally.
Mm-hmm. Interesting comparison. Junk food. Guardians
And
junk
like,
food, and then Tower of Terror is like a 3-course meal.
Yeah,
a banquet. If you. But I don't.
Maybe sushi, would that be like one where every detail is done precisely enough, and the experience of eating, you know, of a like a really like high-end sushi meal. I'm just coming up with funny
sushi.
comparisons.
I hardly know her. That wasn't funny. Well, anyways,
Give yourself a bruh.
Give yourself a. Has to be done. Sorry, guys. Has to be done. Well, anyways, we do have a voicemail that I'd like to get to before we continue, and this was sent a good while ago, so I apologize for getting to it so late. This is from Alice, and this is touching on the discussion we had earlier in terms of the Star Wars Land ideas that were thrown around. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what Miss Alice has to say about this.
Okay. Hey guys.
I guess this isn't Al. Is this Al?
My name is Carlos. Just gonna say that. And
oh well, the transcript said Alice. So
the fact that they made a sequel trilogy themed Star Wars Land instead of the original trilogy is kind of pathetic. Because no one cares about the sequel trilogy. I'm just gonna say it. No one cares about it. The original trilogy is possibly the most classic film franchise in history. You know who I blame? I blame Kathleen Kennedy. Sorry, can't talk today. But I want to hear your thoughts. I don't know really, because I'm just innocent bystander watching my beloved franchise die a slow and painful death. Yeah, that's it. Matt, nice glasses, by the way. Okay, see ya.
Thanks. Nice glasses, by the way. Thank you. I appreciate that. I like my glasses. Well, the transcript said Alice, so I apologize for getting his name wrong.
Never trust the transcript.
Yeah, that's true. Especially these Google ones, they're not always accurate. So
they're very
We can talk at length about our thoughts on the sequel trilogy, which I've actually done before. If you listen to my Bruh Moments podcast, link in the description, shameless plug. My friend Mikey and I talk about the sequel trilogy compared to the original trilogy. But yeah, do you guys have any thoughts on that voicemail before we continue?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't necessarily blame Kathleen Kennedy, she's been involved with Lucas and even Spielberg from the very early days. I would blame Disney a little bit more.
Sure.
But you know, if it was a land that took place, like it really doesn't take place in the sequel trilogy. It like takes place in the time period, but it's not like a land about the sequel. It's very, I don't know. It's interesting, but it's a conversation for another time. But yeah, I don't necessarily think it's pathetic, but I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, I can understand the
frustrating.
anger.
I think is
Frustration,
I think is a better word I feel like for a lot of people, because I think the reason why Kathleen Kennedy is to touch on this for a little bit is I think the reason why Kathleen Kennedy is treated with a lot of disdain is because they feel like that, like she's really leading the charge on it, and you know, she is kind of in a lot of ways a final say on the sequel trilogy, and because they were disappointing for a lot of people, she just pretty much became the fall guy, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people compare her to like what's that, Kevin Feige, I guess, is like the comparison that the two make, which I don't know if that's necessarily a fair comparison to make, but anyway, yeah, it's a discussion for another time. I would love to talk about that at some point with you guys, but back to everybody's favorite Tower of Terror. Where would you guys like to continue on this discussion about this
I don't know. Is
attraction?
Is there really anything else?
I mean, not really. I mean, I think I mean, I'm the only one that's experienced the Tokyo version, and I've said my bits. You know, the system is the California version, but I think because it has a different storyline, I think it doesn't have that same issue of feeling lesser. It can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think on its own it's great, and I think I mean, there's not really much to say. It's just I think I consider it, you know, of the second generation, you know, of Joe Rody and Tony Baxter, you know, those Imagineers. I think it's really one of their best, and signifies really I think really a further perfecting of what was done with WED.
Sure.
That was really achieved. I mean, with Haunted Mansion and Epcot Center and the like.
All right. Well, I think that is going to wrap up our discussion here about the Hollywood Tower. Guys, can you believe it? An hour and a half is how long this episode has lasted. Just like the old days, you guys. Remember when we used to have shorter episodes like this? Man, it's been a while. But yeah, I think that's going to end this episode. This light right here is very bright, and it's giving me a little ache in the head up here, if that it'll give me a headache. But so, anyways, thank you, Mr. T. Will, for joining us on today's episode. It's always a pleasure to have T. Will, and again, thank you to Mr. Jeremy as well for joining me today. Alex, you guys, send lots of love to Alex. Comment on his YouTube videos. Go tweet at him. I think at his website, alexthehistorian.com, you can find ways to donate to Alex to help support him, not just the channel, but, you know, his life in general. Link in the description. And do you guys have any closing thoughts you'd like to say before we end off the episode?
Not really. I know that, you know, it's been 6 or more weeks since we've been in quarantine, but I really can't stress enough. It's a time to embrace science, not attack it, and definitely not attack our essential workers who are risking their lives to save lives.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it with that. Kind of zoomed out from Disney there, but
sure.
Yeah. Kind of like what I said last time, you know, we're getting through this, and I think the fact that we are taking greater steps of reopening things, I think shows that we're getting to a form of stability for the foreseeable future until we get the tools to bring us back to normalcy.
Sure. Yeah, and I would like to touch, guys, a lot of people focus on their physical health, but I do think this is a great time to focus on your mental health as well. A lot of people have been locked inside, you know, cooped up, not a lot of social interaction.
Cabin fever.
At least physical. Yeah, I mean, cabin fever, yeah. Yeah, so if you guys... I don't really know where to get. Just focus on your mental health, you guys. If you're feeling down, we're always here, I guess. You can comment on the videos. We'll reply to the comments. I don't know. But yeah, make sure you guys are having like a lot of communication with like your families and your friends just to stay active. Even if it's just for like a few minutes a day, or if you play like video games with your friends, that's a great way to like get some form of like human connection out there. Even just like tweeting at people, I'm sure can suffice in most cases. But yeah, don't just focus on your physical health. Your mental health in some cases is a lot more important than your physical health. So we'll leave it at that. I just slammed my hand down on my mouse. It hurt really bad. So we're going to end off the episode here, you guys. Links to T-Will's Twitter as well as Jeremy's Twitter and Alex as well will be down in the description below. And as always, if you'd like links to all the articles we refer to, they will be down in the description as always. And I think on that note, it's time to close off the episode. So thank you all for coming to today's episode. And as always, have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.